So, Mayor London Breed of San Francisco recently made a comment saying San Francisco is not a museum, neither is America as a whole. More or less, I'm paraphrasing. In response to the whole issue of upzoning. So, basically, there's been a big conflict in San Francisco lately over whether the city should be upzoned more. And by upzoning, what that means is basically tearing down the existing buildings and creating new buildings that are taller and can house more people. So it's basically concerning housing, not office space, because I don't think there's much of a demand for more office space right now, but there is a huge demand for more housing. Now, first off, okay, the Mayor London Breed, that's a very bizarre name. Like, what kind of person has the name London Breed? That sounds like a brand of cigarettes or something. But yeah, she appears to be black or mulatta, like some sort of mixed race. And I'd imagine she's obviously a liberal and a Democrat. But when looking at this bigger issue, like I agree with the premise that there's not enough housing in the cities or in our metropolitan areas in general. But the issue is leftists and liberals always tend to attack historic buildings first. And I'm seeing a lot of comments from leftists and liberals on social media being like, "Oh, well, just because it's an old building doesn't mean it's historic. It's only historic if like Martin Luther King Jr. lived there or Rosa Parks lived there or something like that." It's like, nope, that's not what historic building means. What it means is buildings that are built in historic architectural styles. And frankly, many of these styles are increasingly rare. So that's part of the motive behind preservation is the fact that we don't have a million buildings of these styles across the United States or Canada or the world. These are often relatively rare styles, and also that they have aesthetic merit. And that's another thing. There's always this modernist undertone to these statements that oh, architecture is subjective, beauty is subjective, blah 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 blah, which is obviously a total load of bullshit. Because again, the whole subjectivity argument, do I really need to open this can of worms? Is somebody really going to argue that oh, whether Shawshank Redemption is a better movie than Mr. Magoo is a subjective argument? Is anyone really going to say that? Is the Academy going to say, you know what, we're not going to hand out Oscars anymore because film quality is subjective? This entire argument is just bullshit. But putting that aside, it is true that there is a housing problem. There is a housing crisis in many major cities because there is a lack of housing, affordable housing, and just housing in general. And again, regardless of your feelings about mass immigration and all that, obviously I'm against mass immigration. I am against multiculturalism. I'm against all these things. But nonetheless, even without that, it could still be an issue because there's just a general trend of more people moving into certain cities. I mean, even in some cities, even the white population is increasing. I know in Washington, D.C., the white population has been increasing in the inner city. So, even if immigration wasn't an issue, this could still potentially be an issue in some cities. It's just a general trend across the world is that people are moving more into urban areas. And maybe they shouldn't be moving into the same big cities quite as much. Maybe people should be dispersing a bit more. I don't mean in terms of suburban sprawl, but I mean in terms of maybe people should be moving more into the smaller cities, the medium-sized cities, the cities of 500,000 or a million or 250,000 in the metropolitan area, as opposed to the big megalopolises like the Bay Area. And again, that's a legitimate point, but nonetheless, this is happening right now. So, what is the solution? Well, my solution is I think this needs to be a fucking hashtag. Hashtag Upzone Silicon Valley. Why is it that it's always the historic neighborhoods that have to be destroyed? Why is it that the suburbs will fight tooth and nail to the death? you can pry my fucking single family zoning from my cold dead hands. And many of these suburbs aren't even Republican. Many of these are like woke Democrat suburbs. They vote majority Democrat. They're very racially diverse. These places are not overwhelmingly white. Some of them are actually overwhelmingly Asian in the Bay Area. But yeah, these suburbs will nonetheless fight tooth and nail against any kind of upzoning. And why is it that the city of San Francisco, which in most neighborhoods is already dense, like it's already at minimum medium density, in some cases high density, it's already dense enough in like I'd say 80-90% of the city to meet the minimum threshold for public transit being viable. It's far more dense than the surrounding suburbs. So my question is, why are they picking so much on the city of San Francisco when it comes to upzoning when they could upzone suburban areas instead? And many of these suburban areas are already served by public transit to some extent, like by commuter rail or the BART system. Now, BART, I believe, Bay Area Rapid Transit, I believe is heavy rail. I don't think it's light rail. I think it's heavy rail. So more like a subway system, but I think some of it is above ground. So yeah, I mean the BART system and also commuter rail, I think like it no, I don't just think, I know that it serves large portions of the Bay Area. It serves Oakland. There's commuter rail between San Francisco and San Jose. I know there's a commuter rail line that goes right through Silicon Valley. So again, why are we not talking about upzoning the suburbs? Why is it that the suburbs are never the target for upzoning and it's always the city, which is already dense? And not to mention the city, which has a lot of historic architecture. Now, personally, San Francisco, it does have a great deal of Victorian architecture. I will say, on a personal level, according to my subjective preferences, it's not my favorite city in North America architecture-wise. I think it's all right, but it's not the best. I think it might be a little bit overrated in that regard, but nonetheless, I completely understand the fact that if they allow them to just start destroying historic architecture everywhere in San Francisco for the sake of upzoning, it will be a precedent that will likely lead to the destruction of historic architecture in cities that I think are a lot more architecturally beautiful. Like it could lead to this in New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Washington, D.C., Chicago. Although to be honest, I think the most beautiful parts of Chicago are the like commercial buildings more so than the residential areas, like the Art Deco skyscrapers and stuff like that. But nonetheless, I mean, in Canada also, we are seeing this already in Toronto in areas with a similar density to the areas that are being debated over upzoning in San Francisco. Like a lot of Victorian homes in Toronto are being destroyed for the sake of building condominiums, which is, yeah, upzoning. So, yeah, I mean, it's an issue in Toronto already. It's being done in Toronto already. I don't know if this is being done in Montreal, but that's another city where I could see it potentially being an issue. But yeah, definitely the Boswash cities, I could see it being an issue there as well. I wouldn't see it being an issue so much in like New Orleans because there's not really any demand there. Like that city's kind of shrinking. Um, Savannah and Charleston, I don't know because those cities, I think at least Charleston is growing, but I mean, I think the reason it's growing is because people like the historic architecture, and that creates a bit of a catch-22 situation. But to be fair, I think they have plenty of land to grow outward also, whereas San Francisco is a bit more inhibited in that regard, in those regards by geography. Um, but yeah, I mean, San Francisco, yeah, as I said, like it's inhibited by geography. Like it can't just sprawl outward forever because there's the ocean, there's the bay, and there's mountains, which form geographical barriers that prevent further expansion. Not to mention, there's a lot of protected land, like national forests, with like redwood trees and other tall species of trees, I believe, in the coastal regions. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are preventing them from simply sprawling outward. And to be honest, that's a good thing in many ways because this fucking sprawl, it's just kind of depressing. Like just seeing these cities just sprawl on forever and the natural environment being destroyed so these cities can just sprawl forever, destroying all the farmland, destroying all the natural areas, the trees, the forests, just destroying all the fucking natural beauty. Like, it's just disgusting. And again, another reason why I keep saying the world's overpopulated. But yeah, I mean, the solution is, yeah, upzone the suburbs, and specifically upzone Silicon Valley, because I'm sick of the hypocrisy of Silicon Valley. Because a lot of these tech companies are, in theory, on board with things like walkable cities, upzoning, public transit, but yet, oh, they don't want it in their backyard. They want it all in San Francisco. No, fuck you. Upzone Silicon Valley. Let's build more condos in Silicon Valley, in these fucking low density, not even upper middle class, like elite upper class neighborhoods, the neighborhoods where all the tech moguls live. Upzone that shit. And I'm not just saying this as a troll, I'm fucking serious. Upzone Silicon Valley. So, yeah, that's my solution to the housing crisis in San Francisco and in other cities across North America and likely in other parts of the world. I'm sure similar discussions are being had in other countries too. Maybe Australia, New Zealand, maybe even the UK. Yeah, I mean, or even continental Europe potentially. Like, they could be debating over upzoning Paris, even though Paris is already extremely dense. So yeah, I mean that's my solution to this sort of thing. Like in San Francisco, yeah, upzone Silicon Valley. Like, hey, it's in a perfect location too. It's right between San Francisco and San Jose. It's right on the rail line. Very strategic location. Yeah, upzone Silicon Valley. Upzone the shit out of it.